Okay, we should probably get started here. So, develop mode. Let's pop out of develop mode first. So, develop mode is our it was actually the first mode in ACDSee that was saw essentially developer, so not develop mode in the sense of photography, but rather in the sense of coding. It was the first mode that we sort of developed to work with raw files. So in ACDSee, those of you that are familiar with ACDSee years and years and years ago would have noticed that we would have had a manage mode, and then there was a edit mode, and that edit mode had very limited capabilities. So develop mode was introduced, and the purpose of develop mode is to provide a non-destructive platform for people to edit their images, specifically with a focus on raw files. Now, if I don't want to waste anyone's time in regards to this, but I want to make sure that people understand the difference between editing a raw file in develop mode and editing a JPEG in develop mode. And so I'm just going to open up this question. Do people understand how develop mode edits those files? If not, we can talk about it, but I just want to get a feel for it. Are you familiar? Okay. I'm getting some yeses, which is good. People are familiar. Okay. Awesome. So normally I would illustrate this, but people seem familiar with it. So that's great. So people understand that how it creates edits in those files, in the fact that it interacts with something called a sidecar file. So that's what develop mode will do in order to edit your images. So develop mode will, when you create an edit to an image, it's also going to indicate to you, let's see if I can find an image that has an open development here. It will also indicate to you when a development has taken place. So, in this case, I'm just looking in manage mode here, and I have this image here, and this image is it has a little indicator, and that indicator exists on the bottom thumbnail there that showcases to me that it has been in fact developed. And so this little indicator, which is the half moon here, the sort of yin and yang icon here, indicates that this has been through the development process in some way. Now, sometimes what this means is that the developments have been made to an image, pardon me, and that those adjustments have been edited. So if I go into this image, for example, and if we just make a very quick adjustment to this image, let's say we lower exposure, and then we navigate back to manage mode by saving the file, you can see that this icon appears. So all this icon is telling us is that some change has happened. What it doesn't tell us is what the unique changes to that image are. So if we go back into develop mode, and I believe if we refresh this, so essentially we reset that exposure adjustment, navigate back and save the image, that icon will still be present. So ACDSee doesn't make a distinction between a change to an image and a refresh of a setting. It treats those things as if they are still developed. Does that make sense to everyone? I just want to make sure that people understand that this icon in of itself indicates that all it says, it's kind of like a binary. It's like, have you gone in and have you done something with the file? Right. Thank you, Ali. Okay, so when we're developing an image, and we have this icon appear, and we don't want this icon to indicate information to us, that if we haven't made any adjustments to the file, what we typically want to do is we want to make sure that the processes have been restored. And so this is in ACDSee, all images can be restored to their original qualities, with the exception of images that you've saved as, and essentially you've exported an image into a new state, and then that's treated as its final or essentially starting state. So if I right click on this and I click on something like restore to original, what it's going to do is it's actually going to remove that icon, which is sort of treated as a form of metadata on this file, and then therefore is sort of undone in a way, and it showcases that file as is. So you don't have to just develop an image independently or individually. So how many of you are familiar with our batch development function? So this is like this is bar none the most powerful thing you could do in ACDSee. It's just so strong. It's a really incredible tool, and I just whenever I have an opportunity to talk about it, I do. But yeah, I am curious how many people are familiar with that. Brian says no, Bud says no. Okay, I'm gonna blow your minds. This is cool. Okay. So when we interact in develop mode, and we can talk about these, when we go to actually to pop into develop mode. If I select multiple images, so for Bud, Brian, and Gorals, I'm sort of understanding if I have selected multiple images in a folder or even a catalog, okay? So we could have made a catalog search for, say, food images, for example, or we could be navigating to a specific folder like this landscape folder that I'm working in right here. What we can do is we can click on a group of files. So these, I don't know, from 4 to 12 here, and we can create a batch function. And so what I'll do is I'll navigate to this batch tool right here, and I'll select batch develop. And so what batch develop will do is it will, we can actually create a preset that we can apply to these images. But one of the things that's important to note is that if I actually look through this here, you can see that ACDSee comes with a lot of already pre-made developments, batch developments. So when we make edits in develop mode to an image, and we like those edits, this is really relevant for images that have similar lighting situations, similar lighting qualities. So what we can do is, say, for example, we have a wedding photography that we've taken, and all of the wedding photography was taken at that wedding with very similar lighting qualities. And if there's something we want to tweak about the lighting, we can create a development, a preset that we can run on these images, like what we're going to do right now. These ones, like I said, are for the most part are all already default in ACDSee. So you will have these too right now. And if you open up ACDSee alongside this workshop right now, you'll see that a lot of these will be present. There will only be some that won't exist, and that's because that I've created them. So let's just add a contrast development for reference. Okay. So I have no idea what this is going to look like. It might look unappealing on our images, but the point is that we can run it. So if I select contrast plus plus here and click develop, what it's going to do is it's not only going to add that indicator, right, that little icon on those images, and you can actually see that icon being added in real time here, but you can also see that those images are adjusted. And so we can see them change one by one. And so this is super powerful. And the reason why this is super powerful is because we can make these adjustments to like images. And historically, what people would do is they might copy copy adjustments from one image to the next, but that still requires you to individually navigate to all of these files and then to make those adjustments, right? So batch development enables you to save a preset while you're working in develop mode and then apply that preset to your images. And as you can see here, those adjustments are visible. Let's just look in our film strip here. We can see those images. And like I said before, if I right click on these images and I restore the process, what it's going to do is it's going to remove those adjustments. So we can see that adjustments are, that looks really nice. Wow, that came out great. Some of these are overblown. Obviously, this one's like way too many highlights in this, highlights and whites. But some of these came out okay. So this is a very powerful tool. So batch developments is, and it's funny, I've been doing these work. You navigate to batch develop from the top menu bar in manage mode. As long as you have some images selected, the batch development will be applied. So you can select as few as one and as many as, I mean, you could select hundreds, it doesn't matter. The only thing that's slowing you down is the actual application of the effect itself. But if you just like click on a bunch of images, say you have like 1,000 images you want to change, you would start the batch development process, let that process run, and then just go make a coffee while it's making its adjustments. So again, like this is a crazy powerful tool. This is just such a powerful tool because it takes away an enormous amount of development time, and I'm always blown away by how many people are not familiar with this tool or newly familiar with this tool. Okay, so that covers sort of batch developments and some of the sort of back end processes in regards to what appears here, this metadata here, and then also what's going on in the background in terms of creating a sidecar file to actually contain these adjustments. Doc, did that answer your question in regards to this location here? Anyway, we should find an image and we'll go actually into development and talk about some of the functionality now. Let's work with a different file than we did last time. Maybe I'll do some people photography as it changed this time. Go into this image here. Okay. Doc said trying to get the drop down with the presets. Okay, well, it's right here. So it's second from the list, batch develop. And then when you click on it, it brings up this little window here. And this window contains all of these adjustments. And again, these are the ones that you can create yourself, right? These are the presets that can be made on your own. Oops, this is not the right folder. Sorry, this is the right folder. Okay, awesome. As long as you have it, that's all that matters to me. Okay, so so if we go into develop mode here, right? So develop mode is broken into sections. So people already have some degree of familiarity with develop mode. There is 4 major panels by which you can interact with adjustments. So we have the detail panel here, we have the tune panel, we have the geometry panel, and then we have the repair panel. And all of these functions are present in edit mode as well. But the difference is, like I've talked about previously, raw development capabilities. And so they also are non-destructive in a, it's called parametric non-destructiveness, when you can go in and not only can you go back to an earlier version of and you can edit what you've adjusted, but you can edit individual elements and sort of tweak those elements. And then, so it gives you this degree of editability and non-destructiveness that wouldn't necessarily be present in something like a layered editor, like edit mode. So everything you do in develop mode is super non-destructive. It's a really, really non-destructive platform, and it enables you to sort of engage with your images directly. Now, is everybody familiar? I'm assuming everyone's familiar with the concept of non-destructiveness and destructiveness, but I should probably not use that jargon unless it's understood. So does that make sense? Okay, great. So, so the tune panel is the first panel here. And actually, to just even engage with this, we can minimize these elements so we can just think exactly about what we're engaging with. So the tune panel is engaging with color and light. So it's engaging with hue and luminance primarily, which is very different from the other tools. So detail engages with texture in a way. So in this case, sharpness is actually a really good word for what it engages with. Engages with sharpness, and it engages with things like noise reduction. Actually, I just edited an image the other day that is such a good example of noise reduction. So I'm going to pull it up for when we talk about detail in more depth. Geometry changes the shape of the image. In essence, can adjust the actual, contents of the image. So we have things like crop here, and the ability to adjust a perspective of the actual image itself. So changing the way that the image is received. In addition, it can also rotate an image. And the lines that appear as a grid right now are really useful to engage with your image, especially if you're working with an image that is a landscape. And actually, that's probably a good thing to use here. So I'm going to go to a raw file that I have, and we can actually go through the process of editing that raw file, because it is it needs some work. HDR, I believe, is what it is. Yes. Okay. So I'm just going to find a raw file from this section here. Let's work with this image. Probably would be good because the lighting situation isn't the best. Yeah, this is a good image to work with. Okay, so this is an underexposed image, and it might not be, well, the geometry of this image might not be the best. Actually, this one isn't that bad, but I've seen worse. Let me see. Let's see here. These all might be the same because it looks like it was taken with a tripod versus an image like here. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so we'll stick with this image. That's okay. So in this case, if we wanted to change, so geometry has these other elements to it. So the one that I get common questions about is lens correction. So lens correction is a sort of an automated process that ACDSee builds out for all of its all of the camera models. This is one of those things that takes a while to update for specific cameras. And so when you engage with lens correction, you might not be engaging with something with a camera. Your camera might not be listed yet. And so the reason for this is because the developers don't have open access to like the lens profile of your camera. So they have to be sort of created in a way that over time that sort of like accounts for the camera's specific qualities. So, but what we can see here is that when I enable this, I can have a look at which maker of camera there is, what specific camera, and then the actual lens that's being used. And so when I adjust those qualities, you can see that there's already a slight adjustment on the image just by applying the actual make, model, and lens. And then we have the ability to further adjust by a manual correction. And what you can see is that when I pull this inwards, this gives the almost like a fishbowl effect, and does the reverse of that if I pull it outwards. Can everybody see how it's sort of applying a like a rounded function to the image as I draw this inwards and outwards? So this is just a manual correction, but like I said, each camera, provided it was taken with a raw, taken with your camera in a raw format, this will automatically, this quality will automatically fill itself. Doc, how do you get the toolbar to the left of the screen? The develop tools will be by default open in develop mode. There's a little pane function up at the top. And what panes does is it can close or hide certain elements. So in this case, I have develop tools, snapshots, histogram, history, and develop presets. So when you're in develop mode, all of these things will be present. As you can see here, I've got a film strip that is displayed at the bottom here. And then I also have the histogram, the development presets, and then the snapshots section here along with the info palette. And just for clarity's sake, what I did is I clicked on these two icons up at the top. Does everyone see these, or rather these three icons? Can everybody see these icons that are up at the top here? And what these do is they're like quick panel removals. So they hide the panes, but they don't actually disconnect the panes from the UI itself. So when I click on these, Doc, you can see that those panes disappear, and then they reappear when I click on them. And this is something that's present in edit mode as well, I believe. Oops, didn't mean to do that. And so what this is it hides those panes, and I can also hide the develop tools pane itself, but it doesn't actually remove them from the UI. So there's two ways that you can interact with the panels on this on this user interface, you can go to panes up on the top left-hand corner in the menu bar, and you can open them yourself individually, or you can use these hide functionalities, and they will bring those elements up if they aren't already present. I actually really like these. I just, from a standpoint of cleaning up my user interface, like if I don't intend to work with presets right away, I can just get rid of it. So, okay, so lens correction, rotate and straighten. So that's fairly self-explanatory. In this image, actually, this is an interesting one, because what you can do is you can draw horizons and it'll rotate accordingly. So let's see here. There we go. So I have this little icon here that says you can activate this, and what you can do with this is you can just draw the horizon on your screen, and it'll rotate the image accordingly. And you can see that there's already been a slight rotation that's occurred as a result of me drawing on that horizon. So I can draw it like this, and again, it'll rotate in accordance with that. And then you can change perspective, which we've already talked about. And then we can crop this. I'm not going to, but you can crop this so you can change the dimensions of the actual final product. And then the vignette correction. So vignetting is if your image already has an inherent vignette, what you can do is you can actually add vignette, add white. So what this does is, there we go. So this will add light to that area, which will essentially correct for any automatic vignetting that your camera applies. So this gives you the ability to add white where it isn't present. You can see that actually in this image, it looks like it could use it a little bit. Although vignetting, in this case, it does flatten our image slightly. But that just gives you a good idea of what we can do here. So that covers geometry. Let's talk about detail, and then we'll go to the major tune tab, which is sort of the sort of primary a tab within Develop Tools. So a doc asked, did you have to collapse all the tools, I'm assuming, under geometry individually? So each of these, so in develop mode, each of these sections, right? So geometry has each of these. You don't need to collapse these in order to move to another tab. I just have a tendency to do that because I'm one of those people that, you know, like if you have too many tabs open on your browser, I have a tendency to close those. So I just minimize these as I go through. I also think that in general, closing these helps me visualize what I've actually changed. And this is probably an important time to note that these are, they're persistent if closed or open at all times. This is a good time to note that their persistence, or rather their effects, their adjustments to an image are visible in these little blue nodes. So I want to make sure that everybody can see these. So just sound off if you can see these. But what these blue nodes do is they showcase that an adjustment has occurred to this image. And they just tell us that an effect is on. Right. So we turned on lens correction. We had rotated this image. We applied a vignette correction, and we didn't actually crop this image, but we did interact with the these side panels, which treats it as if it has. So these blue icons showcase to us that something has changed, which is pretty important. And then there's also this little indicator to the left of my turned on adjustment, and that deactivates an effect. So I guess what I mean by that is that if I wanted to undo this functionality of the rotate and straighten, I can click on that little refresh icon like I just did there, and what it will do is it will then unapply that effect to my image. But this image is not fully straight, so I do actually want that effect. So I'm just going to quickly reapply it there. Oops, that didn't look like it worked. Let's see here. There we go. So you can see that when an effect is applied, I get this like blue icon that appears here. It showcases to me that that effect has been applied to my image. And then by clicking on this, what I can do is I can actually activate and deactivate that effect. So this is in essence previewing or hiding that effect. I rarely use this functionality, and I think part of the reason why is because develop mode is already so forgiving with its non-destructiveness that it's almost unnecessary to hide and show something, but this tool is there if you need it. And then lastly, something that's very important to note, and I think what I'll do is I'll just do this to showcase what I mean. This section here, oops, let's try this again. This section right here, there is the main preset wheel, which is this cog wheel that appears to the right. And we will be talking about this a little bit later. And then you have this little icon here that is refresh, but it refreshes for all of the functionalities that you've changed, which includes the ones that have been done in repair, geometry, detail, and tune. So again, only click on that refresh tool if you want to completely refresh your image back to its original status. Good to know, because sometimes when you have lots of adjustments, these are relevant for that. Okay, so detail. You know what? Let's go to an image that has some detailing issues. And we'll come back to this image a bit later because I want to adjust the rest of my images in this order here. But I had this image sent to me the other day, and it's amazing. So this was sent to me as a result of a previous workshop. Check this out. This is so cool. So it's in the, I have a folder here of black and white images, although this isn't black and white, but it's just a nice, good example of an older image. So this image was sent to me. It's incredible. So it is a great example of an image that we would want to restore in ACDSee. Also, let me know if you'd like me to do a restoration workshop, because I do cover that every once in a while, but I've never done it in our community yet. So this image does need to be restored. So there's you can probably see this, but there's a substantial film grain, and also it looks like, I don't know, it just looks like this has been scratched a bunch. You'd like that, Goral? Okay, we'll definitely do that next time because I love them. They're so much fun to do. Good to know. I'm gonna write a note of that actually. And maybe while I'm writing a note, just a reminder that we do have a coupon code for this workshop. So I will put it in the chat. Write that down if you plan on buying anything in the store over the next couple of days, because it'll give you $10 off. So you guys want to do a restoration workshop. Awesome. I would love to do that. Okay, so develop mode. So where we would do a restoration, at least in develop mode, there's some tools in edit mode that we would need to restore this photo. But for develop mode, we do have a really powerful tool in that of noise reduction. So what noise reduction does is it will essentially try to preserve as much of the detail as possible while smoothing out and applying a sort of a degree of blurring to some of these more aggressive particles. So I'm going to really zoom in, and I want you to watch the effect on this area. I'm just going to slowly increase this. Oops, let's keep the strength up. And so as I increase this luminance, what is important to note too is it is a universal effect. Like, it's affecting other areas of my image, but it's just so egregious on this coat because the coat is so dark, right? So you get rid of the grain of that, but it does its best to preserve as much of the detail as possible. And then we have like some other sliders, like you can reduce the strength of the effect. And so reducing the strength is obviously going to have more of these sort of particulates and scratches come through. So we can find like a healthy balance. But I find, especially with images like this, if we actually are zooming out a bit, contextually that change, that sort of slight blur effect that it's applying, is removing a lot of that grain. Can everybody see how much of that grain has been removed just from before and after? I just want to make sure that that's visible, because obviously in a workshop, I'm not sure if that comes through, but I'm just showcasing a before and after. And this is sort of the power of a noise reduction, right? And maybe this actually gives a really good time to sort of switch gears and talk about repair, because if we are going to take this image seriously and adjust this image, a noise reduction would be the first thing we do to this image, just to sort of clarify all of this granular sort of scratch marks and dust that you see on this image. But there's still many parts of this image that would want to be repaired, in essence, spot removed. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, while we're sort of engaging with noise reduction within the detail panel, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave this effect applied. So we're going to leave that on, and we're going to navigate to the repair section. And then in the repair section, we can actually showcase the functionality in a cool way. So repair just has two tools. It has the repair, so the heal clone and blended clone function, and then the red eye reduction, of which there isn't any in this image. But red eye reduction allows you to literally select an eye and reduce the amount of redness that it appears in it. It's really straightforward. So let's not spend too much time talking about that. But what we can do is, while we're in this image here, we can actually start using the blended clone tool to sort of remove these spots. So how the repair tool works is it wants you to right click on a part of your image and then sort of left click on some of the more egregious areas. So what you do is you take a sample from an area that, that is visually doesn't have any issues, and then you apply it to another part of your image. You right click on the area that you don't like. So start going through and getting rid of all these this granular details. That blended clone is different from heal and clone. So heal, what heal is going to do is it's going to take a sample and it's going to sort of apply that sample in a blurred method. So it's going to take a literal part of your image and then paste it onto that part of your image, but it's going to be pasted sort of, it's going to mesh it. There's going to be a certain degree of like opacity application. Versus clone, if I right click on an image and I right click on an image, another part of my image, it will quite literally copy and paste whatever we see. So what blended clone does is it makes a homogenization of these two functionalities, where it's going to copy a part of your image, but it's also going to apply it. Let's see here. Can you apply the dust and speck removal to the jacket only? Good question. If I was to have gone back to detail and clicked on something like the brush tool, we can use the luminance noise reduction and paint it on. So why don't we talk about that in a sec here? I just want to showcase one more thing, and that is we can use blended clone to hopefully get rid of this really egregious dust mark that's in the center here. So we'll take the blended clone tool once again, and I'm just going to try to do my best to remove it here by using similar parts. We can definitely use the brush tool to apply a luminance adjustment. And as you can see, I'm sort of just going through and I'm going to slowly make an adjustment. Oops, that's pretty rough, actually. Let's try that again. There we go. I don't love that. There we go. That's better. So we can use these tools to work our way through an image and sort of remove these specks. So that gives you an idea of how you would use a repair and in conjunction with something like noise reduction within the detail tab. But as far as repair goes, there's not a lot of complexity to repair. In general, I prefer blended clone as my sort of main method of removing spots on my image. But all it is select a part of your image that you like and then apply it to a part of your image that you don't like. And yeah, I think that is actually something that ACDSee right now is working on, Doc, is to sort of address some AI concerns when it comes to images. And so, I mean, the whole part of the people mode in ACDSee, I'm not sure if you're that familiar with it, but it was about the beginning processes of developing AI functionalities within ACDSee. And so that is then the point of that is to apply that to other things and to utilize it to see things like this in an image. Okay, so somebody asked a really relevant question, and that is, how would we apply noise reduction to just the jacket? So what I'm going to do is does everyone see this brush gradient tools that you see up here? Is that visible to everybody? In ACDSee, in develop mode, there's two ways you can interact with an image, okay? Develop mode's kind of unlike edit mode in this way, in that we can make a general application. So these general applications appear in this section right here. if I navigate to tune, all of these boxes from general, white balance, light EQ, color EQ, all the way down to post crop vignette. These are generally applied to our image. And I guess what I mean by that, it is universally applied to our image with the same degree of amount, or the same variable, right? Now, the brush gradient and radial gradient tool change this relationship, but they come with their own sets of tools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this noise reduction. It's going to reapply this noise reduction that we see here. And instead, what we're going to do is we're going to manually apply this detail adjustment using the brush. So when I open up the brush, you'll notice that the brush tools, the tools that apply to the brush itself, are indicated by this light gray box here. So whatever is contained within this light gray box is what you can edit using the develop brush. And the same goes for the gradient, and the same goes for the radial gradient. And so what this enables us to do is make a manual adjustment to the luminance. So do a noise reduction. And you can see that I can also apply similar functionality in that of sharpness. So if I was to just crank sharpness here and paint on sharpness, you can see that the parts of my image indicated in red here are now sharper than they were previously. Let's see here. There we go. So when we're using the brush tool, we have the ability to do this show brush strokes application. So what we see here in red showcases the parts of my image that I've brushed on, okay? And for effects that are not immediately visible or maybe more subtle, this is really important to have this tool turned on. What we're doing, or what we're about to do, is a noise luminance noise reduction. And so when we apply this noise reduction, we'll just apply it in full. We'll probably be able to see right away the effect that this has. So earlier, Brian, when you, sorry, Goral, when you asked if you can apply it to just the jacket, can you see how I would do that just by using the noise reduction function? And what the noise reduction function tries to do is it tries to maintain any structural integrity with like major lines, and while still being able to remove these flecks of dust and grain scratches that we see here. So nice. So you can see that application. So if I go up here and work my way around the jacket, you can see that it's really just the jacket that's been affected by this noise reduction. So there's more tools than just noise reduction here. Yes, so that's really a fun element of this. And then we can sort of dial this back and find like a home that we like that matches the degree of noise reduction to sort of not disrupting with the background. No, so Doc, this was a photo that was sent to me by a like an ACDSee user, and he basically came to me and was like, hey, I would really like to know how to fix this image. And so I'm just working on a tutorial for our YouTube page right now that talks about this image, but I just thought it was such a good example of like a realistic older image with film grain problems. So I'm also going to probably utilize this image to talk about it in a restoration workshop. So because people seem really interested in that, we'll do one of those. But this is just a really good way to talk about the detail tools while we're in develop mode, and to also, like Goral mentioned, you know, to do yeah, the hairdos are pretty wild, to make some adjustments to this image as we're going through. So does everyone see that there are two icons at the very bottom here that showcase different adjustments? So when we use develop brushes, or when we use gradients, or when we use radial gradients, you'll see that I can hover over these tools to make to see what see different brush strokes that I've made. And so the first one, which is visible here, is a is that sharpness adjustment that I made to just their heads. So if I unclick that, it'll hide the function. right? And then the next one over to it, the one on the right here, is the one that applies the luminance adjustment to the jacket here. And so if I click on these elements, you can see that their respective functionalities, the sharpness set to 100 pops up, and the luminance and noise reduction. So one of the things that's probably a good bridge to talk about now is I'd like to talk about smart brushing. How many people are familiar with the concept of smart brushing? This would probably be a good transition to move away from detail tab into the tune tab while also talking about the smart brushing functions. Brian is not, Goral is not. Ali, are you familiar with it? Not so much. Okay, great. What I'm going to do is let's move away from this image. Let's pick a landscape image that has a visible sky with some degree of mountains, or maybe like a trees in the foreground. Let's see here. This is a really cool tool. And it has yeah, this is perfect. Let's do this. So this image has a highly detailed tree and then a sky, okay? And so what smart brushing enables us to do in develop mode is to make a manual selection of something without targeting other elements of my image. So if I wanted to make a manual selection of the sky around this tree here, without actually selecting the sky, there's a problem that occurs without smart brushing. So if I wanted to say, just give an example, let's change the exposure. Let's change the hue on my image. Let's see here. Let's see here. Color strength. Oh no, color EQ is what we want. Sorry. Color EQ is what we want. And then we want to go to, so that's brightness. I believe this is hue. Yeah, okay. So if we want to make, this is, okay, so let's make it purple. Yeah. So as I work my way around this image, this isn't actually even a very good example. Let's do exposure. That's probably the best example. There we go. Way better. Okay, let's turn this off. Yeah, we'll just undo that. And instead, we'll focus on exposure. So if I'm brushing, right, and if I brush around my image here, you can see that the exposure adjustment is being applied to my sky, but it's also been applied to my tree. And this is sort of an effect that we're not looking for. We want to just have that adjustment apply to the sky in this case, avoiding the actual tree. So when we do that, yeah, you can really see it with the saturation too, or the vibrance, where the parts of the tree that I selected, which we'll showcase now, also appear quite bright and their saturation is affected. So the workaround here is to utilize something called smart brushing. Smart brushing is a way to target pixels as you're brushing. So if I turn on smart brushing, which you can see underneath the develop brush here, under the magic tab, if I actually start this process of adjusting the exposure with smart brushing turned to magic, what it's doing is it's essentially looking at this blue sky and it's looking for pixels that share that color or within the realm of that color. And it's also looking for a certain degree of similar brightness or lightness in this case. So if I make my way around here, you can see that what's not being targeted is the tree now. So if I wanted to make this darker, that might be a better example. So as I work my way around, what it's doing is it's targeting just the sky. And we can play around with something called tolerance. If I increase tolerance, what you'll see is that it's less discriminatory as I work my way around. versus a much lower tolerance, which, as you can see, there's little granular patches in there. And that just means that there's more variation in either color or tone. And so hue or tone rather. And so if I find those showing up, I can increase the tolerance to sort of get a smoother picture here. My image has such a contrast of color that almost a lower application in this case of tolerance is unnecessary. That would be more important if this image had less variation in color. So as I can work my way around, and what you can see is that it's sort of not targeting the greens here, it's sort of just targeting the blues. Now, when I've created a capture or a selection of my sky, the sky around my tree here, what I can do is I can actually turn this off. So I'll turn off smart brushing, and then I'll just finish the selection of my sky. And I will just finish making a selection here. So the white edge that appears on some parts of this here has to sort of be selected out. Sometimes it's effective at this. Sometimes it's ineffective at this. And I think you just need to, oops, I just realized I'm still working with smart brushing turned off. Yeah, sometimes it does leave a little bit of a halo. And the effect here also should be noted too, right? That the actual effect that's being applied will also leave a halo, especially if it's sometimes if it's a light effect, it's going to leave a little bit of that. Whereas if I let's say we move exposure up normally and we change saturation, that halo isn't going to be present when I increase the saturation. The halo appears because there's a part of the image that couldn't be selected based on that that sort of manual selection method. So it doesn't appear with all the tools. It just has a tendency to appear sometimes with a light adjustment, like with exposure. So what you do is you just need to spend more time with your selection than I have in this case to make sure that it's going to be. But in this case, the increase of the saturation, and I don't know, like can we change the color here? Yeah, I can change the color of the background to be a darker blue, for example, or like a cyan, right? I can input like a color in this case. But as you can see that sort of effect, that halo that appears around the edge is not applied when we sort of engaging with these colors. It's more when you're changing the sort of exposure around our image. Does everyone understand the smart brushing functionality and how we can select parts of our image with something like smart brushing and avoid other parts of our image? This is also a really powerful tool as well. Like this is especially if you're engaging with things like hair or the outline of trees and such, being able to turn this on and off between smart brushing. And also I didn't really explain this, but smart brushing has 3 modes rather. So you can turn it off, or you could turn it to color, and color will just treat the color in the case that it's only going to select the color or it's going to keep in mind similar colors when you're using your nib to make a selection. Brightness is the exact opposite of that. It looks at only luminance. And then magic is the one I tended to use the most because oftentimes I want a mixture of both hue and luminance when I'm making a selection. So really powerful tool. Yeah, really, really, really fundamentally powerful tool. So we've talked about brush tool and how the brush has its own adjustments. So the brush tool in the Tune tab is probably the most has the most sub tools. As like when we opened up detail, it was fairly limited. But if we click on Tune and then we're engaging with the brush tool, the great linear gradient or the radial gradient, you see that these will actually have 3 sub panels here. So the first is general tools that appear like exposure, saturation, vibrance, tint, color strength, that sort of thing. Then we have the ability to adjust color EQ. So again, we were engaging with the sky. So if I wanted to make that sky more purple, then blue. This engages with color EQ. And so we have things like saturation, we have things like brightness, we have things like hue, and then we have contrast. So these are all within this develop brush here. And then finally, we have tone curves, which enables us to actually apply a curve over our selection. So there's a lot of very cool functions within the tune brush gradients functionality. Let's dial that back a bit. There we go. Okay, so that covers the brush tool for basically detail tab and for the tune tab. And then lastly, I think it would be a good time to just go back to our old image and make some adjustments and then save a preset so we can apply that to other images. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate back to that HDR image that we had earlier where we made where we adjusted the geometry. And let's start actually fixing this image from a visual perspective. So we will use the tune tab, but instead of using the brush, we might use some general tools. And the very first one, I think what we'll do is we'll bump up the exposure, and then we're going to go to our light EQ tab. And as you can see, once again, as I do these, you'll see the activated group, bring up shadows, bring down midtone slightly, bring up highlights. Maybe we'll bring down highlights. So now we have a bit more in the midtone there. I might play around with contrast slightly. Just slightly to bring that up in the center here. I think I still want some more light in here. Maybe I do want some more highlights. And then we can go into something like color EQ. And again, these are general applications, not brush applications. So we can adjust things like saturation, brightness, hue, and contrast. We can also add a bit of a temperature adjustment with white balance. So if we want to increase the yellows in our image, or if we wanted to add a bit of tinting, we can do that. We can go into color wheels here. We can make a color wheel adjustment to our image. So if we wanted the blues in our image to be a deeper saturation, we can do that by clicking on the blue, and it will zoom in to the parts of our image that look like that. And then we can increase the saturation. So this is default. This is with a higher setting. And then what we can do is we can also add a bit of contrast there as well. And that's going to make those blues pop, brings out our foreground a little bit, which is nice. And then I think what we might want to do is adjust tones slightly and just make some adjustments to our image here. Is that better or worse? Let's see. Oh, definitely worse. We don't need that. Okay. So we have made some adjustments to our image here. So you can see that I have a general adjustment. I think that was exposure and contrast. You can see that I have a white balance adjustment. You can see that I have a light EQ adjustment, and you can see that I have a color wheel adjustment on the blues. And so here's the original image, and here's the edited image, as you can see. So it just gives you an idea of what's changed. Then what we can do is we can actually save this preset. So this is how we go about saving the preset. We'd click on the preset wheel itself, and then we would just save this adjustment. So I would go, let's see here, let's save preset. And what save preset is going to do is this is going to allow us to make those batch adjustments that we made earlier. So as you can see here, I have this big box that shows up, and this big box is not necessarily something that we have to worry about. What we want to do here is we just want to select all. And unless there is something that you're trying to omit adjusting, for example, if I don't want to adjust geometry, I could take out our rotate and straighten that we had made. But in general, when we're interacting with the development presets, all of the adjustments we've made to this image is actually what we're intending to save. So I would just go through the process of selecting all, unless there's a specific one you want to remove, in which case remove it manually. Let's call this develop. Develop. And then it's a December, I say, and we'll hit OK. And what that will do is it'll save the preset, as you can see down at the bottom there. And if we navigate back to our folder here, then we could take this adjustment and click on our images right here, our 4 images, navigate to batch, develop, and then just find that development, as you can see listed right here. And I'll apply those developments to my image. And as I do so, you can see that those developments are applied and our icon appears at the bottom left here. That kind of concludes what I wanted to talk about today, friends. Is there any other questions? That covers pretty much everything there is to talk about in develop mode. How to use it, talks about batching, it talks about the specific tools. I haven't spent too much time on detail, but that was a really good example of detail today. Talked about repairing it with the a blended clone tool. We talked about the differences between brushes and general tools. We talked about an important element of like making a preset. And yeah, that sort of concludes what I was hoping to talk about today. If there isn't any other questions, I will mute my mic and conclude for today. But thanks so much for participating, people. I really appreciate that. And that sort of covers everything that I wanted. And let me, not just before I forget, just make sure if you're interested in purchasing ACDSee and you haven't had an opportunity to do so yet, or if there's a product that you wanted to purchase, make sure to use that coupon code at checkout. It's COM001. And that will get you $10 off in the store. If that is something that you're interested in, I would recommend you using that when you make your purchase. Generally, those coupon codes are good for a couple days after the workshop. Okay. Thank you all so much. If you have any questions that do not pertain to this workshop, just email me. You can email me at aprice@acdsystems.com. I'm going to mute my mic now. You just make sure to write that down if you'd like to contact me, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you so much.